Hey everybody, Carmen DeLuccio here, and I want to talk to you about Uranus going into Taurus. Now, this is kind of a big deal because Uranus is one of the outer planets, which include Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And those planets don't change signs as frequently as, let's say, the other planets like Mars, Venus, Mercury, or the Sun or the Moon. And so Uranus has an 84-year orbit. That's how long it takes to go around the sun, and that's how long it takes to go through all the signs of the zodiac. The last time Uranus changed signs was in 2010, 2011, because it went into Aries, and it went retrograde back into Pisces, and then popped back into Aries. So whenever a planet goes into a new sign, it becomes very noticeable, and sometimes even becomes noticeable even right before, leading up to it, as it's on its way into that sign. It's moving forward into that direction. So I'll give you an example. In October, we had Jupiter enter Scorpio. It's going to be there until November. It's there just over a year, 13 months. And literally like the week leading up to it entering into Scorpio, we started already see it manifest. So for example, with the Me Too movement and Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff, that was a very obvious manifestation of Jupiter in Scorpio. Scorpio rules fear, Scorpio rules secrets, Scorpio rules sex, and Jupiter rules the media. Jupiter and Scorpio can be overcoming fears, but Jupiter sort of could expose secrets and things like that. And so whenever there's events like that, these things actually validate astrology, and they validate the tropical zodiac that we use. Because a lot of people nowadays, they learn about astrology and then they read some article online, and then they say, oh, the zodiac's wrong, or there's 13 signs or whatever. And these events actually validate that the zodiac that we're using does work. And this is just one example. Another example is we can look at the last time Uranus changed signs, and it's so literal. Uranus, so like I said, it went into Aries 2010, then it went retrograde back to Pisces, and it entered Aries again on March 11, 2011. Now that date might sound familiar to you, and that's because that was the day of the Fukushima incident. And literally, like, that event is a very clear manifestation of Uranus changing from Pisces to Aries. I'll give you an example. Uranus rules natural disasters, sudden events, sudden disruptions. These are just some of the things. I'll talk about other things it rules. And when the earthquake happened in the ocean, Uranus was right at the end of Pisces still. It was like hours away from going into Aries. And Pisces actually rules oceans. And you can, Google it. You can look at some references to see that I'm not making this up. And so the earthquake happened in the ocean, which is Pisces, and Uranus could represent earthquakes, things like that. And then after the earthquake in the ocean, a tsunami was created. And so tsunami is ocean, it's water charging forward, moving forward, which is very Aries. Aries is a charging forward energy. Aries is kind of like a bullet in a way. And so that tsunami was a combination of Pisces, Aries energy. And then when the water came onto the land in Japan, Fukushima, sometime around that period, Uranus popped into Aries. And then within hours, I don't remember the exact timing, that's when there was the explosions at the nuclear power plant. Uranus could rule explosions, but especially when Uranus popped into Aries, which is a fire sign. So we saw a watery Uranus incident, and then we saw a combination of the Aries Pisces with the tsunami, and then boom, it popped into Aries, and then explosions, which is a combination of Uranus and Aries. And I remember that day when it happened. I was studying astrology, and I remember I was hanging out with a bunch of astrologers, and we were just like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, we just couldn't believe how it was like you could have did the play-by-play. It was all within Uranus in Pisces change, and then transitioning, and then going into Aries. So that's a very obvious example. Now, recently, in the last week or so, we've had the volcanic eruption in Hawaii, and this is again Uranus. We're already noticing this energy of its transition. The volcanic eruptions, anything like that, like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, very Uranian. And the volcano, when a volcano erupts, there's the lava, and lava is like it's like kind of like a hybrid between fire and earth, because it's very hot, like fire. But when the lava dries, when it cools off, it turns into rock. It's like a fiery rock. So that's a very clear, and this is a big volcanic eruption. This isn't like, this is a big deal. It's not like people would be like, oh, volcanoes erupt frequently. No, not that frequently. This is a major, and they think it's going to get worse. And I read something yesterday, that the volcano is like actually spewing rocks too. So I don't know that much about volcanoes, but this is a very clear example of Uranus changing signs. And probably, so what's going to happen is Uranus goes into, I'm putting out this video like less than a week before, but Uranus is actually officially going into Taurus on May 15th or May 16th if you're in the far eastern part of the world. So there's a good chance we're going to notice some manifestations of it. But what's going to happen is then Uranus is going to it's going to go back into Aries retrograde. It's going to pop into Taurus again next year in, where's the date? I have it written down. In March 6th, 7th. Yeah. So next year. So we might even notice it even more next year because that'll be like what happened with Fukushima. The second time it went in, it was even more obvious. So let's talk about, another thing I want to mention is that some of these energies, which I'm going to talk about, we could have even started noticing it around since January 2nd, 3rd, because that's when Uranus ended its previous retrograde and started moving towards Taurus. Now, Uranus, everyone's going to notice as it changes signs, everyone's going to notice some kind of shift in some way. For some people, it's going to be major, and for some people it might be more minor, depending on if Uranus is affecting your sun sign, you're going to notice it a lot more. If it's maybe just going into a new house or it's hitting a more minor planet, then you won't notice as much, but you'll probably notice some kind of shift as it transitions signs. Now, the transition of Aries to Taurus is like this whole year up until March, right? So this whole year is like less than a year is a transition period. Now, so Uranus rules like liberation. Uranus could be the awakener. Uranus has to do with the future. It could have to do with technological advancements. Uranus can bring is sort of like an unstable energy, but it's also a revolutionary energy. Uranus is a bit of a rebellious energy. It can be a disruptive energy. It's an electronic energy. And again, it could represent sudden changes and things like that. Now, it going into a sign like Taurus, Uranus and Taurus are kind of like, mixing oil and water. They're like completely different. Taurus likes things stable, likes things routine. And Uranus going in there could kind of shake things up. Taurus rules things like money, food, nature, physical things, material things. Taurus rules the senses, or it's associated with the senses. It's associated with values or what we value in the world. It rules vocal cords. It rules the throat. It's associated with our security, our routines, beauty. So with Uranus going into Taurus over it's going to last until 2026. We're going to probably see some kind of advancements in these things. So for example, we might see like some advancements in how we use technology to produce food, for example. So a negative manifestation of that would be some further advancements with genetically modified food, which I'm not a big fan of. But then we might see some other advancements that are more positive and more healthy, for example, at the same time. Another thing too is because Taurus rules physical things and the production of physical things. Whenever Uranus goes into Taurus, if we look back at previous times that happened, there's always some kind of like advancement or development in how goods are manufactured, right? Like material goods, especially like fabrics and things like that. So we might see some kind of advancement with that. What's interesting is that leading up to this period in recent years, 3D printing has was invented, and so, but it's not really mainstream yet. It's not something that everybody has yet, and so we're probably going to see some big leaps in how 3D printing, the technology of it, but also it's going to be probably more integrated into society. I remember reading some stuff about 3D printed food, Torus rules food. Maybe that could be, what I was talking about. I don't know what to think about that, to be honest with you, but these are just some examples. We're going to see some things around that. And what else? In terms of like natural disasters, which Uranus could trigger that, it's possible that maybe when it enters Taurus, May 15th, May 16th, that week, or maybe when it pops back into Taurus, when it finalizes in Taurus next year in March 6th, 7th, it's possible we could see some kind of maybe like earthquakes, like a Taurus kind of natural disaster. Hopefully not, but it happens, part of life. So that's another example of how this can manifest. But also because Taurus rules money and what it is that we value, we could see a shift around those things, right? So one of the things we can look at is since 2009, when Pluto entered Capricorn, which I've covered in previous content that I've done, we've seen the birth of cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency is a technological form of money. The technology is more advanced than regular banking, for example. It's a new approach to money. Now with Uranus going into Taurus, there's a very good chance that over the next 7 years it could be integrated more. But it was birthed when Pluto entered Capricorn. Capricorn rules banking. Taurus doesn't rule banking. Taurus just rules money and in our values, what we value. When Capricorn is what rules money. So Pluto's in there right now. Saturn entered recently in December. And so we're over these next few years, especially, but even beyond that, and even prior to that, we're going through a period of sort of transforming and redefining financial structures, which is Capricorn. Now with Uranus going in Taurus, Uranus is kind of joining in on the party, and it could help excel that even more. However, with Uranus and Taurus, things could be anything to do. See, Taurus also rules commodities and money and commodities. With Uranus and Taurus, it's possible that things could be still a little bit unstable, even with cryptocurrency, because I see a lot of people, I've even said it myself, that Uranus and Taurus could be good for cryptocurrency, but I also want to give a little disclaimer that it still brings some instability, and I'm a little bit unsure. There's some things going on the end of the year or early next year that makes me a little uncertain about Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin at that time. But anyways, I still think that anything that has to do with the technological advancement around money, Uranus and Taurus is still really good for. But if you're making investments, things could still be a little bit shaky. It's hard to say where it's going to go, and Uranus is the hardest to predict. But these are just some examples. Another example, in 1934, the last time Uranus was in Taurus, the U.S. had a really big drought. It was a big problem, and they say I read somewhere it was like the worst drought in 1,000 years, I think, in the whole world that they know of, or maybe in that region. I'm not sure. There wasn't people living there, but and they said in 1,000 years it was the worst drought, and that could be an example. I'm not saying it's going to happen this time, but that's just an example. Taurus rules food, and the drought really affected farming and agriculture. So that's another example, right? And so that could happen. Like prices of food could be a little bit unstable, but at the same time there could be some kind of advancements in how we produce food, or maybe how we ship food, maybe how that whole industry operates potentially. Now, what else should I mention? So I just want to talk about how, I think I mentioned it, I don't remember, but Uranus stopped. It started moving forward from its previous retrograde on around January 2nd, January 3rd. And so some of the Uranus energy and what it means for you could have started in January. In January, we also had a lunar eclipse, and then we had a solar eclipse in February. There's a lot going on in January where Some people, like for me, I started noticing more anxiety at that time. And I noticed a lot of people were actually dealing with that kind of thing. And so January could have gave you a bit of a taste of what this period is going to be about. It's sort of like the introduction to this period. Then when we get to in August, around August 7th, August 8th, Uranus is going to go retrograde again. It's going to be moving back towards Aries. It's not going to be in Aries right away. And August is going to be an interesting month. August, we're going to have, the summer in general is going to be interesting because Mars is going to be retrograde for most of the summer, from late June until late August. We're going to have eclipses in the summer. There's a lot of activity going on in the summer. Plus Uranus is changing motion. When Uranus enters Taurus, it's going to be in a square with Mars on May 15th, May 16th. And so there's going to be I would imagine that this summer, there's going to be a lot of sort of rebellious energy. People might get angry easier and rebel more easily, especially because, even in that period, Mars and Uranus are going to be interacting at that time too. And when Mars is retrograde, people get angry more easily. There's more inner tension. So we're probably going to see more of the sort of explosive qualities of Uranus, rebellious qualities in the summer. Maybe in world events, but even in our personal life, probably. And then when we get to November 6th, 7th, Uranus pops back into retrograde, back into Aries. We might see some kind of shifts or maybe some kind of major events in the world happening at that time. We might feel some kind of Uranus energy at that time that I mentioned. And then when we get to January 6th, 7th, 2019, Uranus goes direct again. And then it finalizes in Taurus. It goes back into Taurus March 6th, 7th. So probably probably when we get to January 6th, 7th, sometime between then and mid-March, we might be, whatever challenges that we're dealing with between now and then, from January until mid-March, there could be sort of it's more of the concluding. It's going to conclude some of the challenges that we're dealing with for this year. We'll probably have a better idea of how things are moving forward with us. Whatever changes we need to make. Some people might feel like they need to break free from a situation. They need to liberate themselves. There could be, Uranus sometimes could represent losses, separations. These are the negative qualities of Uranus. But Uranus could have a liberating, awakening effect on people. It can be exciting. It can be, new experiences. Some people, when they get Uranus transits, they become self-employed or freelance or integrating technology in their life more or, that kind of thing. So, there's pros and cons to Uranus. Now, if you're familiar with your natal chart or your sun sign or your planets, if you have anything on the cusp of cardinal signs and fixed signs, so if you have anything in late Aries, early Taurus, late Libra, early Scorpio, late Cancer, early Leo, or late Capricorn, early Aquarius, you're going to notice it more strongly this year because Uranus is going to be triggering, those points. But also, if you're on the cusp of any sign, you're going to notice the Uranus energy to some degree. So those signs that I said, those cusps are probably going to be a little bit more dramatic. And also, if you are late, early Libra or late Virgo, could be a bit dramatic. And if you are late Scorpio, early Sagittarius as well, these are probably going to be the most challenging manifestations of Uranus in that part of the zodiac. Now, if you are, let's say, early Capricorn or early Capricorn or late Sagittarius or early Virgo or late Leo, you're gonna notice more of the positive effects of it. If you're any of the other signs I mentioned, it could be a mix. It could be challenging, but there could be some good manifestations too. But if you're early Virgo, like the ones I said, early Earth sign, late fire, like Virgo, Capricorn, or late Sagittarius, late Leo, it'll be a bit of an easier aspect for you. If you're early Pisces, late Aquarius, or early Cancer, late Gemini, it'll be a bit easier too. It won't be as, it'll be more of a little more subtle than the other ones that I said. And the good thing though about this Uranus transit is that this Uranus energy right now is that it is going to be in a loose trine with Saturn in Capricorn. So Saturn does bring a little bit of, depending on your birthday, depending on other variables, but Saturn does bring a little bit of a stabilizing effect, right? I'm an early Taurus, and Uranus is going to hit my moon, then it's going to hit my sun. I'm like, oh no. But Saturn is also trying all that stuff. So there's also like, there's a bit of like because it's all happening, all the stuff's happening in earth signs. There's also could be like a theme of building and how we work with our relationship with the physical world, with the material world, with money, with work, with career, which is Capricorn. So there's some like, it's not all Uranus. Saturn does bring a little bit of building and stability energy to this as well. But if you're familiar with your chart, if you know your birth time, you can see where Taurus is, what house it's in, if you have any planets there. And if you're interested, I do readings. You can get in touch with me and we can look at it a little bit more deeply and more personalized to your chart. And so yeah, I just want to share that with you guys. And happy Uranus and Taurus.